I don't think they're socialists. For one, I don't think they can even define what socialism is the public ownership of the means of production. And when I ask my friends that are all Bernie supporters, or overwhelmingly Bernie supporters, sadly, their answer is, I ask them, what's the difference between democratic socialism and regular socialism? And they always just say, well, it's just different. But I never get a reason, of course, because they can't define one or the other. But what they think, because they all say we're not actually socialists in the sense that when I explain to them what socialism actually is, they say, oh, no, we're not for that. They just want a strong interventionist state. And they want it because they think market, again, the economic illiteracy. They think that there's market failures. They think that corporations are all greedy and all these other issues that they assume are all these bad things. And in some cases, they are bad things, but because of perverse incentives, because of the state. But I think overwhelmingly, they're not socialists. I think they are capitalists in the sense that they want people to have their own businesses and do their own things, but they just want it heavily regulated because they think that capitalists have perverse incentives that harm consumers as opposed to provide them with a good that they actually value and are willing to pay for voluntarily.
Yes. Okay. I think also Bernie Sanders doesn't really know what socialism is too, so there's that. And I'm not, I mean, that's a throwaway line, but also when he was interviewed one time, he said something, I forget the exact words, but it was something like, well, I mean like what they do over, in Sweden or something, like caring about people. That's what I mean by socialism. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I'm a socialist, but. Okay, so Ziad, you said something interesting that caught my ear in your talk about how your friends, they have these so-called progressive goals, but they're completely ignorant of economics. So, I've noticed that too, that a lot of these people, when they're speaking, you can just tell that, a main problem here is like, how am I going to, crack this nut if I want to get through this person, is that they lack even the basics of price theory, things like that. People complaining about Uber surge pricing, for example, and just realizing that they don't understand the first thing about supply and demand, so you'd have to start from square one. So my question is, so I'm definitely agreeing with that observation, but do they want to learn economics, or is it that, is it just a matter of, oh, okay, so all it's going to take me is 45 minutes, and then we're going to have a budding, libertarian on our hands, or is it the reason they don't know economics is because they prefer to engage in like emotional things rather than logical step-by-step deduction?
The latter, definitely. I think, for one, economics is, because we're taught poor economics in school, they have no desire to learn it in the first place because they think that's what economics is, and who wants to learn that? I don't know anybody that does. But at the same time, I think that because they take the state as a given, that they are scared to question that. People are generally afraid of change. And if it's something that we're taught at a young age by our families, usually, and by the state, that the state is a given and that they're necessary and that they can provide a good. And therefore, when you challenge them on that, it scares the heck out of them. And I can understand why, but nonetheless, I think we must continue to push through and teach them what is the right thing. But also at the same time, people tend to avoid conflict. They don't like tough conversations, and that could be even close people that trust you. They still don't want to have that conversation. So usually kind of planting a seed or like pushing them in one direction and then kind of letting them go on their own. But unfortunately, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah, I think a lot of young people are well-intended, and they do want to understand how things work. They do want to see those positive outcomes. And a lot of times, socialists, they may not know, or progressives may not know what that body of philosophy stands for, but they'll hold certain ideals. Like they want a thriving market for healthcare. They want everybody to have access to healthcare. Well, so do we. We're not anti-human, but we have different opinions on how to get there. And we're right, by the way. So it requires, though, as their peers, as their colleagues, as just their fellow students and so forth, to, one, not be afraid to tell them they're wrong, but then two, be able to explain, if they're willing to listen, what the correct way to think about it is. So a big question that often comes up at the end of conferences like these or at Mises U is, what must be done? What is the thing that we should all go out and do now to change the world? And I think the answer is to go edify yourself. If you're a student, go to Mises U. If you're a grad student, go to RGS. If you're a practicing professional, frequent Mises.org. read Man, Economy, and State, read Human Action, so that when others around you come with their well-intended questions, you can provide a theoretically correct answer. And that is, as much as anybody can ask, an individual proponent of liberty to do.
Okay, let me ask a question of Marta. I think a lot of people that I've talked to, they say, oh, if we could just break the people who are really big on the LP and activism in terms of, this election's our opportunity, and they say, we could just break the strangleheart of this two-party system, then liberty's right around the corner. And yet I point out, well, in Europe, they have many political parties, and it's not that that's a hotbed of anarcho-capitalism over there. So I wonder, can you just give us a sense of, how do things play out when there are, multiple parties and they have to build a coalition and so on? Like, do you think in general that having multiple parties restrains the state, or does that make it easier for the state to grow? Or do you have any thoughts?
It's absolutely the same as what you have here. I mean, we have two big parties, the Conservative and the Socialist Party. And now we have a bigger Communist Party coming to power, because the idea is that Spain is leftist, which is not true. But in reality, they do exactly the same. The only difference is we have Catalonia, and they want to get out of Spain. So there's a really strong party there, and it's only 2 million people out of the 50 we are vote for that party. So whenever one of the big parties don't have enough votes to pass the laws, they just make a pact with them. The reality is just the same.
Yeah, in case you had any glimmer of hope, we just want to crush it. We have a deal with the local tavern owners just to make sure that you're just going to go out here and just drink your sorrows away. All right, I had a question for Ryan, but of course you guys can, I think Brittany too might chime in. So when I was don't let the hairline fool you, I'm not that old, but I am older than these guys. And when I first was in grad school and people would ask me and I said I was into Austrian economics, they really didn't know what it was. Right, and I think we've made progress that now they know enough to make fun of it, okay? Whereas before, they didn't even know what it was. Now they know that, that's that obsolete doctrine. So I'm just wondering, so Ryan, as he mentioned, he's getting a PhD at the Free Market Institute where I am. And so I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts on when you interact with people your age, do they know what Austrian economics is at this point, or is it still, you run to a lot of people, what do you study, the GDP in Vienna? What is that?
Yes, they do know what Austrian economics is. Or at least they think they do, is a better way to put it. There are departments there's a few universities that are sympathetic to Austrian economics, and at those universities there are still various departments and factions within each of them. Many of them are still hostile to the idea of Austrian economics. It's often lumped in with the sort of overarching free market sort of spectrum. You could throw conservative in there and any other number of guilt by association sort of concepts or fields. So they know what it is. Of course, at Texas Tech, it's nice. There's a pretty solid presence there, and we even get students who aren't in the FMI directly, but who still come to events. I'm here with 2 students today from Texas Tech who are not PhD students, but who still wanted to come. So yeah, there's a presence. People know they have an idea of what it is, and that's progress.
Just to chime in on this, 2 quick anecdotes. When I was taking my first LSAT, because unfortunately I want to be a lawyer, I don't know why, but I had a starting conversation with someone before the test started, and he said he's an economics major, and I said, oh, okay, I enjoy economics. I'm not a student of economics, but it's something I do as a hobby. And he asked me what school, and I said Austrian school, and he just started laughing at me. And he said, oh, that kooky brand of economics. Of course, I just did nothing but glare at him for the rest of the LSAT, so that score was not too great. But so that was an example of what my peers thought. But something that I actually encourage all of you to do is I was able to petition my university and get them to accept my online Mises Academy courses. So in the process of doing that, he kept asking me, so what is this? And I kept saying Austrian economics. Okay, so I need to call Austria. I kept saying, no, you do not need to call Austria. Auburn, Alabama, I'll show you the certificate I've completed, Bob Murphy's course. And he just kept saying, so I need to call Vienna, I need to call Austria. Had no idea what I was talking about. And so after 2 hours, I just gave up and went to another professor who helped me out. But and this is a political science advisor who still had no idea what I was talking about. So I do think we have a lot of work to do as far as making sure people know that when it comes to free markets, there's not just the Chicago school. There's more to it than Milton Friedman, that there's a whole other branch. So I think we could do a little better on that.